go ahead and do a time calculation for a projectile that's launched at an angle and then it's going to come back down and land at the same height. Now before, we did a problem where we had a projectile that was launched off a cliff. And that's going to be a little bit different than what we're going to do now because we've got a ball that's going to go up and then it's going to come back down. So we have to deal with that. So we're going to come back to an equation that we used earlier this year. You may recognize this one. Final velocity squared is equal to the initial velocity squared plus 2 times a times d. Well, what we'll do is we'll just calculate the time to the top here, and we'll say that our final velocity is 0. So if you do this calculation, now we just put a little different labels on it. The final velocity in the y direction squared is equal to the initial velocity in the y direction squared plus 2 times gravity, because it's a specific acceleration, negative 9.81 meters per second squared. And then instead of distance, we put delta y, or the change in y. So since at the top, the final velocity is going to be 0, it's going to go up, and in the y direction, it essentially stops and then comes back down. We know that this term is going to be 0. So we'll do a little algebra magic here. And the distance is going to be equal to negative v0 squared all over 2g. And we also know that the final velocity in the y direction is equal to the initial velocity in the y direction plus gravity times time. Again, Vf equals V0 plus AT, kind of what it looks like normal, but we're putting in specific terms here. So then, again, we know final velocity in the y direction is going to be 0. I'm going to skip some algebra steps here, but we end up getting to this equation where the time is equal to negative V0 in the y direction divided by g. Now that's fine for a time, but that only gets us to the top. We need to know time down. So remember that time up and time down is the same, so we can just simply put time total is equal to 2 times negative velocity initially in the y direction divided by g.